just think these are exciting times in university industry collaboration. I think we're changing very quickly. We're evolving with new models, but more than anything, I see a growing interdependency between universities and industry.
Hello, and welcome to the Strategic Partnerships podcast series. My name is Sarah Jabber, Manager Business Development at UIN, and your host for today. Today's episode is the second part of our discussion with Arturo Pizano, Program Manager of University Collaboration at Siemens, Georgia von Guttner, Director of Innovation Precincts at the University of Melbourne, Robert Lorentz, Director of Strategy and University Engagements in 3M's Corporate Research Laboratory, and Leah Burton, Director of the Partnerships Office at North Carolina State University. If you haven't already listened to the first part of our conversation, make sure to check it out. In this second part, our speakers discussed how proximity and co-location can drive innovation, and how they coordinate, track, and measure their connections and partnerships. I hope you enjoy this podcast and gain some new insights. Touching on the notion of innovation ecosystems, and I think you all have, in some form or the other, mentioned ecosystems or mentioned the concept of whether it's proximity, co-location, how, and also Arturo with the recent focus of Siemens on the ecosystem and not just one university or one type of collaboration. In what ways does it help drive more innovation, drive more partnerships, drive more outcomes as an organization?
The word that comes to mind is agility. We are in the space, probably most of our companies are in the spaces where we need to move very quickly. We need to react very quickly. We are looking for solutions to big problems. So in principle, it requires time. But once we identify particular problems, we need to be able to move quickly. What these ecosystems gives us is the opportunity to attack a problem or to address a problem from multiple angles. We can come to a particular area with a little bit of a longer time horizon, and then engage in a traditional, let's say, sponsor research project, or we may be coming into an area that, at least from our perspective, we see an opportunity to bring it closer to the market. In that case, it may be better to work with the university, but other partners. Like in the US, we have these manufacturing institutes that are looking at providing solutions that are closer to the market, or even in some cases, government agencies. So we have these ecosystems gives us that additional flexibility in terms of how to approach or how to address a problem depending on what the life cycle of that research area is. I think that's mostly what we get out of these ecosystems. Plus other things like the colocation and the ability to be closer to our partners. But I think the agility to address a problem in different ways quickly is what we get out of these ecosystems.
Denny, what are your thoughts on that? You mentioned before you also work with centers, startups, so a range of different organizations. Is that something you think about? Being able to access maybe a larger ecosystem or different types of entities when you undertake a partnership?
The universities and startups and national labs are sometimes connected through a program, but not often. I don't see them very often as part of an ecosystem. That getting entree into one leads us into the others. So they tend to be, in my experience at least, separate. However, when you talk about the ecosystem, it tends to be more focused at, say, one of these interdisciplinary institutes at a university. So once you get into one of those with a certain professor, then you tend to find the capabilities, that are of interest to the research group down the hall. And so things will grow organically that way. But in terms of the different types of organizations, we haven't seen, a snowball effect from one to the other.
From the university perspective, I'm sure both of you have quite a bit to say, but maybe also to link that back to another question that's come up in the Q&A is how would you potentially, or how do you attract larger companies, let's say like a 3M or Siemens,
to co-locate or to really be part of this innovation precinct that you're creating?
Maybe let me address a little bit the question about national labs and our ability to collaborate with them in conjunction with our industry partners. And we actually do see quite a bit of this in some specific in some very specific national labs, like Oak Ridge National Labs, for instance, where we have alignment. And to me, the opportunity there is that, a national lab has equipment and labs that very often not even a research university like NC State has. And so there can be a very natural way for industry then to gain access to those national labs through a collaboration at a university like NC State. And so I would say that that's probably how I see it most often. And then, I know we've already discussed some of the national manufacturing institutes and so forth. So to the point about recruiting, or the question rather, about recruiting large companies and then how do they interface with entrepreneurial ventures on our Centennial campus or in other places. What we find is that entrepreneurship is often one of the ways that large companies are looking to collaborate with NC State. And so I see that from a couple of different vantage points. Number one, large companies sometimes come to us for entrepreneurial education. They are looking, in other words, to infuse their employee base with an entrepreneurial mindset, this idea of fail fast and fail cheap, for instance. They may also, of course, want to gain the insight of spin outs that are coming out of our university. And sometimes we invite them, our larger industry partners, to be part of evaluation boards, for instance, when grant dollars are being given to our startups. And you all are probably familiar with that type of mechanism. And then some of our companies that are located on Centennial campus have their own accelerators. And so they sponsor a startup-like activity that may be focused in a given area. And so I'll give you an example. LexisNexis has their legal division on Centennial campus, and they sponsor a legal focused accelerator where they put out a call to universities all over the country. They choose a small handful of those that they will invest in, and they offer them space and access to expertise for a very short period of time at their space on Centennial campus. And so I would say that there's much more of those interactions than you would think that there might be, or well, more than I would have thought there would be. And that's been a really great way for us to expand those relationships. And then I guess I would say one more thing, we're seeing more and more global companies employ sort of an accelerator within their own company, where they identify a few inventors who have an idea. They give them a small amount of money and allow them to pursue a startup venture on their own that is kind of outside of the normal governance of their company. And I've seen that done to great success as well.
Georgia, anything you'd like to add?
Totally echo Leah's experience and observations there, and I'd like to share a new approach. We hope it's going to be successful, but it's a new bold venture for us, and that is looking for strategic partners or curating groups of strategic partners very purposefully around a mission. Now, traditionally, certainly most universities, and certainly ours, has been proudly investigator-driven and led. And the analogy often used is the 1,000 flowers bloom. And it's an inherently competitive environment and proudly excellence-driven and excellence-focused. With the university's new strategic plan and this focus, this capability to very purposefully hunt and land strategic partners, not only around who has the right attributes, if you will, and that still has serendipity around particular industry growth areas of focus, as I mentioned before. We now want to also pursue, if you like to think of them as moonshots, or very specific missions. And the first one the university has pursued or said we're going to go after is climate change. And particularly topical right now, of course, with Glasgow underway. And so there, and this is bold and new for us, and it's going not only looking for those that are innovation-driven organisations, but those that share values and commitment, and who can harness their own sets of stakeholders to partner with us, to work with us in a very recognising for true sustainability and impact, then it must be financially viable and from a workforce point of view, sustainable, and all those key attributes and outcomes, but is fundamentally about moving the dial, and for us at a regional level, collectively for global impact. So this is a new step, if you will, in that evolutionary or maturation process that I mentioned earlier, and very exciting. How can we harness across sort of place-based ecosystems to really purposeful ecosystems? So that's something that we've really just launched this year, and we're starting to move into. That will draw on all our resources, relationships, and these systems to operate. So it's impact at scale is what we're looking for, and coalitions.
Let's say you're working on interdisciplinary partnerships, or partnerships that deal with different parts of the organization, whether it's within the university or within the company. How do you coordinate these activities to ensure the best outcomes, both for yourself as an institution and for your partner? But on top of that as well, I'd just like to ask about, how do you track your connections? Do you use a CRM or something else? Maybe it's not a tool. Just curious as well, what do you use to really maintain the different connections and touch points that you have? Arturo, I see you've unmuted yourself.
Okay, so you touch on a very important or very interesting aspect of Siemens. So I talk about the university relations program from a Siemens technology or corporate R&D perspective. The reality is that's only one of multiple programs that we have that involve universities. Just to give you examples, our Digital Industries Division has an academic partnership program where we basically provide grants, software grants to universities. We give universities access, students and faculty access to our software suite. This is mostly product lifecycle management. It's a separate program. We have other programs that focus on talent acquisition. We have programs that focus on workforce development. We have a hard time, to be quite frank. We are trying to find ways in which we can figure out replicable ways of working together, but it's work in progress. On the R&D side, over time, we've developed a database that allows us to keep track of all the R&D related activities. And by that R&D, I mean sponsor research, memberships, sponsorships, anything where we have an interaction with the university government funding projects gets recorded in that database. We are a very large company, so I'm not sure that everything gets recorded, but that has been a very, very helpful homegrown tool. I think our colleagues in the business units, they use more CRM type tools. By the way, universities are also customers for Siemens. We sell into the universities, which make things even more fun and complicated. But that's how we approach it.
If I can add, once again, Arturo's comments are very similar to what I would say, so I won't duplicate them. But we at 3M, we have our corporate research lab sponsoring the bulk of the research that comes out of 3M with universities, but the business units also do theirs. But at the corporate level, we have all sorts of other programs, whether it's fellowships for graduate students, different donations that are used for a department, for example, or a school to sponsor that. a larger program. And so those are done through our, if you will, our charitable giving organizations. And so those tend to be fairly large gifts, as I'm sure Siemens is too, where they, make a pretty sizable impact upon a research, institute at a university. And so being large and diverse as well, I'm not sure that any one person knows all of those things, but we try to keep at least good information about our own local, programs, the ones I run, the ones that, our giving organization does, and then our student-sponsored programs does.
And if I may add,
Link them, because those, obviously it's important to leverage those connections, and so we do that, I would say, semi-effectively, but not as well as we certainly could or should.
yes, Denny, I just wanted to add quickly that sometimes the best source of information we have actually is the universities themselves. We go to the university and say, are you working with this Siemens group? Because I have no idea if they were working with you. So it's really hard, but as Denny said, there's not one single person or system where we can keep track of everything that happens between Siemens and a university.
Same here, exactly.
Leah?
We do use a database, a CRM to catalog our interactions. And maybe I'll just mention a couple of tactics that we use, because my colleagues here have really shined a good bit of light on the topic, and maybe just to drill down a bit on a couple of tactics that we use. To piggyback on what I mentioned before about this partnership portal, it allows us to post opportunities that companies have to interact with our faculty and students in a way that we are able to then get responses directly back from our faculty. And the benefit of that is, of course, we all know who we know, and we that which we know that they are interested in or currently engaged in, may not necessarily be what they are interested in, engaged in the future. And so part of that approach to equitably developing partnerships is the creation of that portal where we post opportunities that are viewable by all of our faculty. And what's interesting about what happens then is that we will have faculty from more than one department submitting their interest for a given project. And so then when we get them in the same room with our companies, the company may ask more than one faculty member to collaborate on a given research project. And so those are kind of the natural ways that a specific tactic ends up flourishing. And, of course, we have internally an office that is dedicated to interdisciplinary research, but then when it comes to industry partnerships, that's how we encourage those interactions with faculty members who would not have previously thought of collaborating together.
The big differentiator for us between whether you're formally a strategic partner of the university, and that comes to our industry colleagues on the panel. So part of that differentiation or that recognition is a governance framework, and including and the relationships that are formalized through that governance framework are to the highest level of the university. So you're engaging, we call it chancellery, at our C-suite level, if you will, as well as at the leadership level of the cognate faculties associated with that strategy. So you're getting the attention and focus at the most senior levels of the university, and it will have equivalent relationships at those levels into the strategic partner. We'll have all of the tools like the CRM type tools, tracking we call them threads, these multiple interdisciplinary threads across the comprehensive university, usually focused in a particular technology or range of fields, but then drawing, for example, it might draw strongly on our business disciplines or our humanities disciplines. For example, in digital technology spaces, it might be looking at user acceptance or impact on democracy, or these much more holistic type concerns, philosophy or ethics, for example, even if it's a particular set of technology solutions are at the core of the relationship. But we also, particularly around a big differentiator for our innovation precincts, is a dedicated team. And it's almost a way of, if you co-locate at our purpose-built innovation precincts, you get this equivalent level of resourcing as if you're a strategic partner. So you have a personalized service. And it's interesting, Leah, that you mentioned this digital portal, because that's something that we're exploring and beginning to wonder about. The human interactions and the value that the humans bring, the roles. It's the classic human-computer interface type debate at how much can we automate? How can we leave to sort of almost like community boards or bulletin boards sort of organic interaction, or how much where the value lies in terms of the curatorial and the relationship support, the expertise and experience that those that do support business development and work with academic colleagues to bring their best selves forwards in ways that, the different ways of discussion, of communicating, even if it's internally within the university in interdisciplinary ways, as well as with focus on the applied and outcomes, as opposed to the approaches you might take if a more open-ended research approach was perhaps the way you previously or currently been working. So we're feeling around, at the moment, we're very human focused, very personalized in our service at this, I'll call it premium strategic partnership end. And it's where can more automated features add value, but certainly our intention is not that they substitute at this stage, but where can they add value? And that's very much a work in progress.
Georgia, you also mentioned governance, and that's just one, maybe one final in the last 10 minutes, something to talk about is around maybe measuring your strategic partnerships or evaluating the partnerships that you're involved in, whether from the industry side or the university side. Do you, and this is an open question to all of you, do you have a process in place or metrics, guidelines that you use to really track a partnership and measure its progress, measure its outcomes, and maybe at some point it stops becoming a strategic partnership? Is there anything like that you do?
This is an area that we're very focused on at the moment. We don't have the answer yet. And part of it is that our funding bodies, our government partners have a particular set of economic agenda, jobs creation, economic growth, those classic economic metrics, and those measures of spillover benefits that they're very keen to see. And so we are working to how can we track those kind of impacts, which is terribly important. We're also looking at our own internal metrics, how we can support academic careers. If we are to have sustainable models, we need to make sure that we are meeting the objectives internally as well as externally. So looking at internal performance measures and metrics and incentivization and rewards and all of those core things. So what are the measures of success, and linking those to rewards and recognition? That's we've done a lot of work in that space, and that's an ongoing focus. For me, I'm really interested at measures that are being developed, evaluation frameworks around the world, particularly in the innovation precinct space. What's the return on investment? These are astonishingly expensive sets of infrastructure. And what is the difference? What is the delta, if you will, of co-locating people and different forms of interventions, different ways that we can bring folk together, that we can support them to collaborate at scale with much more impact than they might have done anyway, if left alone? And how do we measure what are the best practice? And what is the outcome from that? So we'd love to hear the answer. It's all work in progress for us.
Denny?
I'd say we don't have a formal evaluation process or mechanisms or metrics. The only thing I'd say that we pay attention to, and it's important to us, is are the principal investigators at 3M happy with the result? Did they get the technology developed at the university and transferred to us in such a way that they can use it? For us, that's what matters. And that's at an individual level, program level. But as a group, the partnerships that we have with those universities, when they're successful, we often end up going back again to the same faculty member and the same group or interdisciplinary program there multiple times. And then the programs just explode. So I'll take that as a measure of success. In other cases where there's one and it just doesn't tend to go anywhere, and we've had a nightmare of a time getting an agreement in place that's taken 9 months and we're still sending red lines back. Those are some signals that we have that we're not strategically important to the university. And so, if it's a one-off thing and we have to do it, okay. But otherwise, we tend not to go back to that university. We won't ask for exploration of opportunities with those places. We will with the ones who, are easy to work with. And, it's a real collaboration. I mean, I talk sometimes twice a day with with a industrial liaison person, and we clear problems up and move forward. So that speed and that ease of access and that turnaround is very important to us, because, if we've got a research problem on hand, we want to get moving on that as quickly as possible. So nothing formal, but more anecdotally. But it's very significant.
Yes. And I mean, it also highlights this personal element that at the end of the day, it is a people-based relationship.
Yes.
And if that doesn't work, then, the professional aspect of it won't work either. Arturo?
Yeah, so we have traditionally kept some metrics, number of hires, patents, publications, things like that, that gives an indication of the intensity of the relationship. However, I think over the last few years, and I guess in a sign of how close are we working with universities, the real metric or the real question, it's not a metric, it's the real question that is being asked of the results we get from university actually is the same question that is asked about the results we produce internally, which is, are we developing technology that is making it to the market, that is helping our business units succeed in the market? Again, it's a metric or a way of evaluating our own internal research. But again, in a measure of how close we've come to working with universities, how important they are to us, it's the same question. And we go to the same answer. So we can say, oh, yeah, this work that we did with faculty member X is now maybe not into a product, but it's now made it into a pre-development pipeline. So I think that's in some sense a more valuable metric than the others, and I guess we'll continue using it, publications and patents and hires and so on. But I think that's an important change.
Leah, any other insights from your end?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my colleagues have covered a lot of things, and those elements that really are core, right? I mean, do you have trust? Mm-hmm. Is there continuous and differentiated value of the partnership? Is there flexibility? And is there a willingness to bend when your partner experiences a challenge or difficulty? And so, we see with our strategic partnerships that we're evaluating those on an annual basis to, calibrate, are these still the priorities? And can we still work together on those priorities? And so I guess it also comes down to constant communication.
Definitely one of the key elements. We have a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to ask each of you maybe one final reflection or statement on the conversation, or any maybe tips or advice you would give either from a university or industry perspective on, what can they be doing to either enhance their strategic partnering approach or their strategic partnerships. Maybe starting with you, Georgia.
We've noted in the conversation, I have a particular lens around place-to-place co-location and for strategic partnership. And I'd like to share with you that, and coming off the call, I'm with Melbourne, one of the most locked down cities, communities in the world over the last 2 years. And Melbourne Connect, this one of these particular precincts, it opened in March this year, so in extremely challenging circumstances. We have about 40% of Melbourne Connect is for industry space, and it's full. It's fully occupied. I've been able to fill that space because of the value of collaboration between university and industry. That is totally against everything that's going on in commercial leasing. We have 96% vacancy of commercial leasing in the CBD of Melbourne at the moment. Massive subletting. It's valued. And now it's incumbent on us to deliver on that value.
Thank you, Georgia. Arturo?
I just think these are exciting times in university in industry collaboration. I think we're changing very quickly. We're evolving with new models. But more than anything, I see a growing interdependency between universities and industry. I already talked about how important our universities in our own strategic plan. What I hear from our partners is also how important it is for companies like Siemens to come to the university and be able to bring what we call real world problems. So when we have a company that works on sustainability or healthcare or mobility, the kind of challenges, the kind of problems that we can bring to your faculty for research or to your students, for capstone projects, for internships, are really exciting. And I think that interdependency, I think that's really the only way we're going to really be able to tackle the big problems.
Great, thank you, Arturo. Denny?
So I think Arturo is right. I think universities and industry are moving closer than ever before, in alignment with the goals and the type of research. But I would go back to the statement we were just talking about, that despite technology, despite all this, CRM methods and everything, it still is the best results are achieved by a person-to-person contact. Faculty, to industry PI, or, coordinator to the industrial liaison office. So whatever you can do to maximize that, with industry, with the universities, I'd really encourage that. So having a very strong partnership between those organizations at those key, if you will, gatekeepers, I think is a real recipe for increased engagement.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Leah?
Gosh, I have really enjoyed being on this panel today, and I've learned so much from my co-panelists. And I think we all agree that this is really important work for our society. It's engaging work, and frankly, it's fun work. So cheers to everybody involved with the event here, and keep up the good work.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you all so much for a very excellent and insightful conversation. I've really enjoyed moderating, and I'd like to thank you again for your time and also the enthusiasm you have for this topic. And it shows, the passion you have for your job. So thank you again. I'd say have a great evening or a good day.
Thank you for joining us for today's discussion. Stay tuned for the next episode on the Strategic Partnerships podcast series. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and LinkedIn, and sign up for our podcast newsletter at uiin.org.